Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to my hobby blog. Today I'm really excited because it is now another time for a weekly progress report. So, what did I read in the past week? Well, I finally finished Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, which is book 3 of the Bloodsworn trilogy. I ended up being very happy with this book, but I think one of the storylines I was really disappointed in how it ended, and that is with the character of Elvar. I really enjoyed Orca. I thought her character was my favorite one. I loved her vengeance quest, trying to find a son, trying to get vengeance on the people who had killed her husband. And I just really loved that storyline. I really enjoyed the world building. I loved everything with the gods. All the fights in this book was very epic. I'll say that. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but there was a lot of really interesting sort of twists that I was not expecting. There was one in particular towards the end that I really thought was cool and interesting. It made me sort of bump up the rating, but my original sort of leaning in terms of rating is that it's a 8 out of 10, 8.5 at most. And I think that has to do with the fact that the storyline was a little predictable, I thought. Everything sort of happened exactly as I thought it would, except for that one twist, as I mentioned. And that was really fascinating what John Gwynne did with that. But I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more going on in this book, because what is going on I really like, but I didn't have as much investment in the characters as I thought I would. In book 2, I think, is when I had the most investment in the characters. In book 3, I was just sort of reading because I wanted to finish the series, but I wasn't reading because I was interested to see where they were going, except for Orca. And Varg, I enjoyed a lot as well. I thought his storyline was great, and I really loved Elvar, as I said, but what happens in his storyline, I was not at all happy with. And the ending to her character is very disappointing, in my opinion, and I wish John Gwynne would have went another direction with it. But overall, I think this is a really great trilogy, with Shadow of the Gods, Hunger of the Gods, and then Fury of the Gods. I don't think it's my top 10 favorite series of all time. There's just way too many series that I've read, but comparing this to another modern trilogy that I've recently read called First Law by Joe Abercrombie, I think this is more my speed because of the world building with all the gods and sort of its like Malazan flair that I was sort of talking about when talking about book 2. I really enjoyed that aspect, sort of the character focus, but I wasn't as interested in the characters in book 3, as I already said. But I would recommend it overall. I think book 1 and 2 are fantastic, and I think overall this series I would give a 8 out of 10, 8.5, like as a whole. But I think individually each book, I just wanted more out of the book, and whatever John Gwynne writes next, I'm very interested in reading, because comparing this series to Faithful and the Fallen, which I only read book 1, I don't want to speak about the sequels because I haven't read them, but I was really not motivated. I had really no investment in the characters in book 1 of Mercy, but in Shadow of the Gods, I had a lot more investment. So John Gwynne is definitely evolving as a writer, someone who's getting better at his craft with every single book, and I'm very excited to see what ideas he cooks up next and sort of sees what direction he wants to go in. I'd be very curious to see like I don't know, I don't want to say sci-fi, but I think like a eldritch horror novel from John Gwynne would be really interesting, like a fantasy eldritch horror. I think I'd be really, that would be something that John Gwynne would just nail really well. But I also started this week reading the final book that Frank Herbert wrote in the Dune series, Chapter House of Dune. I'm about a quarter of the way through, and I'm not liking this book at all. I am very sort of bored with what Frank is doing in the Dune series now, and I don't really like how he keeps sort of having these time jumps and time skips and sort of having to restart the character work, because every book he sort of kills everyone off and then brings them back through the Gola experiment, which is regrowing people from cells. And so I really love that in book 3, that concept. Or it started in book 2 and has been going all the way until this book. And I also don't really like what the story is about. I don't want to give any spoilers, but the planet of Dune is no longer around in the series. And it's really disappointing because that was my favorite part of the series, was Arrakis. And Frank Herbert's never going back to that planet now in the series. So it's very disappointing. I'm very sort of resistant to this book right now. And I think my rating is sort of hovering at a 4 out of 10 right now. I'm not liking this book. None of the characters I'm interested in. The world building is sort of just feeling very tired. He's redoing a lot of what he's already done in the series. And it's just sort of, it's becoming too much. I don't know. I will finish this book, maybe. I don't know. But I was hoping to get more out of the final book. But I understand now what people mean. But I think the first 4 books are still some of my favorite books. And I think book 4 is just such a solid entry in the Dune series. But in terms of anything else that I've been doing, I want to finish this book this week. I don't know what I'll read after that, because then I have the August TBR video, and the Chapter House is sort of the last book I had planned for July. So that's sort of what I'm focused on. Okay, so another book that I read this week was Talking Heads drummer Chris Frantz. He wrote an autobiography, called Remain in Love, that he co-wrote with his wife Tina Weymouth, who also plays the bass in Talking Heads. And I absolutely loved that audiobook. And I ended up reading it over like a 2-week listening period. And just the stories that he had about the band was just really fascinating. Because, as I said when I was talking about starting it, I'd only read David Byrne's Bicycle Diaries, which is more about him traveling and using a bike as a mode of transportation. But he didn't really talk at all about Talking Heads, and now I understand why, because he was such a independent person that did not play well with the band. And I was really surprised, sort of, at the friction that he had with the rest of the band, because it wasn't just Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth versus David Byrne. It was him against everybody, is sort of the impression that I got from the book. And I was really struck as well, because growing up, I always heard about how Talking Heads was 100% David Byrne. And I've been listening to them a lot the last 2 or 3 years now. And I've really enjoyed the music a lot, and I love the movie Stop Making Sense. I talked about that in another video. But I really just didn't believe that it was all David Byrne, because Tina Weymouth is such an incredible bassist, and Chris Frantz is an amazing drummer, and he's worked with, both of them have worked with countless talented musicians, and he talked about working with many other people that I had no idea he'd ever worked with, like Johnny Marr from the Smiths, who is one of my big inspirations from high school when I used to listen to them a lot, and I learned a few of the Smiths songs on bass. He also worked with Lou Reed. He worked with the Ramones. He worked with a ton of reggae artists such as Ziggy Marley. It's obvious that they're all very talented. And so this entire myth and lie about David Byrne is really upsetting when framed from the perspective of the bassist and the drummer, because as they're writing in the book, they talk about how they did so much for the band, they sacrificed a lot for the band in order for the band to succeed and for them to go as high as they did. And at every step of the way, David was always there to sort of take the credit for it. And it was really surprising too, because in one of the earliest shows, Chris Frantz talks about how they toured Canada a lot before touring America, before or around the time when they were working at CBGB's a lot, working or playing there and sort of being part of that culture. And they talk about how David Byrne just sort of had his parents buy him a airplane ticket and then sort of left the rest of the band with the tour bus in Canada during the winter. And they had to drive all the way back down to New York alone. And it was just, that was sort of like a big eye-opener. And the drummer talks about that in the book, and how he sort of says in the book himself that he should have realized that this was sort of the guy that David Byrne was, but they sort of always viewed him positively anyways, and sort of tried to make things work. And it did work for a very long time, but it was obvious that David was never happy in the band, and he had to make all of the shots. But it wasn't just him who was talented, it was everyone else. And you can hear that in the not side project, but in the other project, the Tom Tom Club, which I really enjoyed listening to the story behind that band, because I've learned Genius of Love on the bass, and I love that song. It's one of my favorite songs ever. And it was really fascinating to hear the story of how that was formed during the time when they didn't really know if Talking Heads was disbanding or not. And then they were talking about how they were sort of wanting to do a whole album, but the producer was like, okay, let's make a single first. And then they made the single, and it went gold before even the Talking Heads record went gold. And that was a fun story of David sort of being really like shy and realizing, or I guess internally realizing, because he never gave any compliments to anybody in the band about the playing. He sort of just had to ignore them and let them bask in their glory, because they were very talented. It was really frustrating to sort of be a fan of this band and see all these conflicts going on when they didn't need to happen. But I guess life would be totally different if they went that way, and maybe in an alternate universe, I'm complaining now that they should have stopped, in the mid-'80s, or I don't know. But I really enjoyed that audiobook. It's great hearing the voice of Chris Frantz talking, and he's a great storyteller as well. There was a lot of points where I was laughing because of the way that he was describing the situation, or telling a funny story about the Ramones, or working with Lou Reed, or performing in South America, because they ended up meeting a lot of people down there who eventually ended up on Tom Tom Club records. So that was really fun to sort of get all of those different experiences and just all of that. It was just fun. So, yeah. In terms of movies that I've watched, I did go see the new Fantastic Four movie, First Steps, and it was okay. It was fine. I gave it a 3 or 2.5 out of 5. I thought it was just average. The character work was not there. It sucked in that regard. The fights were just okay. Galactus was very underutilized, I thought. Pedro Pascal, as always, is usually the one leading the charge for me in terms of the movies being good, and he definitely contributes to that. Whoever played the Human Torch, I thought was awesome. I really enjoyed his character. Vanessa Kirby as Elastigirl, or that's the Incredibles version. Sue Storm. I didn't really like her character at all. I don't really like sort of the simple storyline of, protecting the baby and the whole mother thing. I thought it was very underutilized and very underexplored. And it was just sort of like a checklist going through the storyline. And that's really my main issue with a lot of Marvel movies, is that it just feels like a checklist that they have to go through. And this movie was no exception to that. I was really hoping that Galactus would be a lot more on screen than he was in this movie. I was really disappointed by that because Galactus is someone who has a lot of potential as a villain, and I really enjoyed sort of the idea that he eats planets and is sort of just going through the universe, just absorbing planets through his just giant ship or whatever. And it was just, they did the least amount with what they could do with the movie, I felt like. So it was fine, but after just watching Superman, which was on the other side of the spectrum, it was just awesome, really fun, great entertainment. This movie was not it. So it's a shame, but I mean, it's whatever. It's the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so can't have too many expectations with these movies. But yeah, I don't really know anything else to talk about. My One Piece journey, I'm almost done with Wano. I'm really enjoying the arc. I feel like it's really long in some aspects. The flashbacks are some of my favorite of the series. Everything with Oden, just to give a little tease. He's amazing. I love Oden. I love everything with Kaido as well. Big Mom is around still, which is great. So yeah, I will do an announcement about the future of my One Piece videos, because I will be switching them up once I reach a certain point in Egghead, but I will talk more about that later. Later this week, I do plan on doing a dedicated August TBR video. I have a few announcements related to that, which I'm very excited to announce, because one of them is a buddy read that I'm doing with another YouTube channel who I just really enjoy watching, and they're amazing people, and I'm really excited for that to talk more about that. But thank you all so much for watching, and if you have any suggestions or books or movies that you want me to talk about in the next progress report, please let me know, because I'm always looking for suggestions, or are there any movies that you just want to talk about? I'd be open to that as well. So thank you all so much again for watching, and please have a great rest of the day.